Let's talk about your work at Google. So you worked on privacy-focused machine learning, and you also done a lot of engineering to deploy these models to the real world, including Android phones as well as TensorFlow, one of the most well-known framework for machine learning. How does it feel to have your work deployed to millions of people?
I was waiting for some form of blog post or like release about that, which came I think this year after 2 years after I left. So that was pretty cool. I actually liked it. It's pretty cool to deploy something, and then it's more cool to write a paper on the thing that you're going to deploy, which is new, and then work to deploy it. So I think I definitely enjoyed the experience. Yeah, I think it's a great way to have impact. But I think in terms of like impact, I think people might argue that whether certain things are visible to the consumer and not visible to the consumer. And in this case, our work here is privacy focused, so it's not something that you would see. It's not like a button that you can press on your Android right now that says you're private or not private. It's just something. It's an underlying mechanism that we implement to protect your privacy when Google try to train on your data. So these deployments, I guess, is more for yourself in that sense. You know that happened. You know it's good and important work. It has to be done in one way or another, but you don't get appreciated as often. So this is different from deploying a really cool demo and then like make that into Google Maps or something. So it's kind of different in that too. But otherwise, it's a cool experience.
So speaking of impact, how do you measure your impact to the world? Do you often think about this?
Yeah, I try to think about this. Like I try to be somewhat partially impact oriented in the sense that the research topics that you pick, the things the problems you pick, you want to solve in your research, you do want it to be useful. You don't want it to be something just like it's over. For me, I think it should be something that's useful. Like it's very simple. People should find it useful. It's the people here is either consumers or businesses. Like it's useful, and then it's scalable. It's not just 10 people can use it. If you do it, 100 people can use it. Like maybe 100 million people can use it, and that would be great. So that means you would want to cut away a lot of useless stuff that you do to satisfy particular norms or like requirements or like hidden rules for academia. Like for example, academia want you to have more math equations in certain. That's not math, more equations in certain papers, but you want to just do something that's like plain practical, simple, and useful, than to have like 5, 10, 20 pages of like dense math that try to look like you're doing something useful. Yeah.
And that's so you prefer practicality and wider impact rather than, or no, I wouldn't say rather, but like over doing theory for the sake of doing theory.
Yeah, but by the way, I do respect. Like I have a tremendous respect for mathematicians. They are really good. They're doing the hard work there. But those things you need people to do. But it's just that not all theory problems are meaningful. So some of them are just purely for the intellectual curiosity and exploration. But for me, it's fun doing that. But I also want to have something useful at the end. And so I like learning about theory and I like doing that if I can, but I would prioritize having something useful. And if there needs to be theory, so be it. But if there doesn't have to be theory, that's also good. Keep on things that are practical and simple.
So you've done both high performing engineering work and research work. But for someone who is coming out of high school and who is looking to explore technical subjects such as computer science or engineering, what are some factors they should consider when they decide engineering or research?
The way I think about this problem is not so much between engineering and research. In fact, a lot of progress in AI right now, you can consider them as quote unquote engineering because they involve a lot of coding and they involve a lot of trial and error, more so than proving things and trying to analyze, like more so than like just running theorems, let's just say. And some can consider that engineering because it's a lot of coding and lots of like debugging, for example. But it doesn't really matter at the end because you're solving a problem and that problem is important. And so you think of engineering slash like I guess doing science as just ways for you to solve a problem. If a particular problem requires a lot of coding and engineering and for it to work well, for you to come up with a solution, then you do that thing instead of trying to do math on something that doesn't require math. I don't think there's a lot of theory around ChatGPT. It's just a bunch of really good programmers came together. They figured out a way to connect 1,000 GPUs. They figured out a way to have I think, 220 billion parameter model for GPT-4 in 8 sets of weights or something like that. They figure out a way to have that many weights, a huge number of numbers, spread out into, I don't know, many GPUs, and make them run fast. And none of that is like quote unquote science. It's more like trying things and being good at programming, good at engineering. And they got it to work, and that's what's changing the world right now, I think. So yeah, focus on the problem more so than the tools that you're going to use. And if you like to explore more on the theory side, like the research side, then you can also do that. I guess what I'm saying is problems come first before the approach.
For someone who is about to enter university, what are your advice for them in terms of exploring and exploiting?
I think try to prioritize exploration as much as you can, because when you're young, you have a lot of time, and you want to know that whatever you're doing is something that you like and something that you can be good at, and you are good at, and then you can make a living for. And sometimes you are limiting yourselves. If you exploit too early, you're limiting yourself to a very, very small subset of the things you could be doing. So my advice is to try as much things as you can, learn from each of those experiences, and then try to figure out what you want to do. And there's no rush or anything. I think you can explore until you're 30. In fact, I knew a friend who was regretting having committed too early into a job which he worked for 10 years, and then he's now exploring different paths. He was a software engineer at Google for 10 years. It was a cool job. He earned a lot of money, but he's now looking to teaching, traveling, music, stand-up comedy, and stuff like that. And so it would be nicer if you do that earlier, because now that can inform your career. But I guess there's no right or wrong way to do it. Depends on your personal circumstance. If you do, for example, have a little bit of financial stress, then it's okay to exploit earlier. But in general, I would advise that you try as much as you can before you commit to anything.
So looking back, in your early years of university degree, what did you want to do at the start, and what did you end up doing, and why was the change?
Initially, when I entered, I didn't quite know like the overall goal of life, like what I want to do. I still don't know now, but there's a clear picture. I think when I entered, I knew I wanted to start a business, something like that, like start a company, something like that. But what does that mean? Like, what does that really mean? What does that involve? You didn't know anything about it, actually. I didn't know anything about it. So as you learn more, you start to know a little bit more about what it takes to, for example, start a software company that writes an app for something. You would know the software engineering skills that you need. You would know the people skills that you need, and you would know there are different career options than starting a business. You can do science. It turns out you can be a scientist. So I think throughout undergrad, you get exposed to things that you didn't know before, and you will come back to the initial thing that you thought you wanted, and you think, well, are there other ways to do it, or are there other things I can do? And for me, it was probably still the same thing I wanted to do, but there's way more different perspective, way more perspectives on that, definitely compared to when I started university. Like now, for example, you don't just have to, go build an app. You can start a company that can do third-party trust. It's a third-party trust provider for differential privacy. Like these things you didn't know exist before, but you knew it after you spent some time on things you never knew existed. And you can also, for example, be an academic while being engaged in entrepreneurship. You didn't know that I didn't know that you could do your PhD and then you quit and bring an advisor along with you to start a company. Like these things, you just have to go and see, and like you update your belief as you move along. So for me, back to the question, for me, it was probably the same rough goal, the rough thoughts, but way more perspectives on the same problem. And I think I'm open to other career directions also now. And if you're like a very young student, I don't think you have to worry too much about what you want to do after. You just keep exploring, keep looking at things, and it will become clear to you.
So you mentioned a lot about exploring. You're encouraging everyone to explore if they can. How can they how can one be informed about the options around them? Because I feel like now there's this constant information gap that everyone knows different things. Some knows more than others. Some have explored more options than other people. So how can one student do to be more informed?
Yeah, that's also a great question. I think reading is very important. You want to read. You also want to talk to different people. So sometimes you talk to a person, you come in and you thought they have nothing to show you. You think this guy is doing accounting and you're doing computer science. There's nothing you can learn from it. But it turns out that there's often something that's unique about this person that you can learn. He has a very funny perspective that they want to show you. And then you learn from that perspective, and you like think about how your experience and how your goals and skills and can be related to that. And sometimes you pick up new ways of thinking and new perspectives about life just by talking to random people. I mean, most of that will be noise, to be fair, but it's okay because you have time. You have a lot of time to just talk and like hang out with people. That's definitely one of the more important ways. But if you're more introverted like me, like don't want to talk to as much people, then you can just spend a lot of time reading online. There are a lot of people writing good blog posts, good tweets, and then there are people writing good books. There's just so many content online right now. Just find the one they're interested in, but also be open to listen to things that are not within your.
What are some of your favorite blogs?
One thing that came to mind was programs essays. So those essays are pretty dense. You do have to spend some time thinking about them. You would read books like Ray Dalio. There's some good, interesting perspectives on currencies, finance, economics, and stuff like that. Yeah, not too much, but for me, it's probably more academic blogs. Sometimes people write about a completely different research area compared to me, and then I read that just to learn what's kind of going on in that space.
Throughout your studies, you talk a lot about exploring again, but it seems like every time you decide to explore something, the computer vision, deep learning, or machine learning, you are very focused. You have always produced exceptional results. How do you stay focused?
It makes sense that you are looking into things that you somewhat enjoy, right? Like, or you find interesting. So when you explore into something, I wouldn't have explored into law, for example. When I was young, I didn't find that interesting. So if you explore into something that's not interesting, you may not focus as much. But there's still a period where you will be able to maintain focus, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks. Just some time for you to tell whether there's something that you're going to spend time on, whether that you find it interesting. I think after the initial period of curiosity and just the rest is more interest driven. So if you want to look at this, you have this initial period of, oh, this is fun. And then you're like, okay, this is actually interesting. I want to learn more. I want to do it. You just find it interesting. And so that's how you kind of stay focused. Now, that's not the whole story, I would have to admit, because you also have friends who are doing this with you. Definitely helps, because sometimes interest and your proficiency at this particular thing are mutually reinforcing. So if you're good at something, you have more interest in something, and if you're more interested in something, you get better at something. So having people who do this with you can help with focus on particular subject, and then you get better at it, and then you get more interest at it, and so on.
Okay.